My name is Clara Weatherby. And to my family, I was always too much, too big, too loud, too opinionated, too emotional, too alive, but never enough where it counted. In our world, the world of pristine silverware and tighter than air, smiles where reputation was ironed onto every lace collar, I was the one wrinkle they couldn't smooth out. I wasn't just the black sheep of the Weatherby family. I was the one they kept behind closed doors, hidden under polite silences, and carefully cropped family photos. I used to wonder what hurt more, being constantly told to shrink, or realizing that no one cared if I disappeared. Until one day, I did. They gave me away. Not in those exact words. Of course, our family doesn't say things that clearly. But the effect was the same. They packed my life into 2 suitcases and sent me to live with a distant relative in a forgotten farmhouse miles away from everything I had ever known. No explanation, no goodbye. Just a smile from my mother, as tight as the ribbon she tied around my suitcase handle. As a change of scenery, dear, she said, as something better suited to your temperament. Translation: you embarrass us. You don't fit. You're not welcome here anymore. But what they didn't know, what they never bothered to look for, was that I carried something with me. Not in my suitcases, not in my hands, but in my blood. A secret. It's a truth so explosive it could burn down everything they had ever built. But first, I had to survive being discarded. The train station was nearly empty the morning they sent me away. Gray skies drizzled something between rain and shame on my shoulders as I waited for the 8:45 to Langsdale. My father didn't come. Of course he didn't. He never did. He hadn't spoken more than 2 words to me since my 13th birthday. When I refused to wear the cinched corset my mother insisted would transform me into something marriable. I was 16 now, too old to be cute, too young to be useful, just the right age to be a problem no one wanted to solve. My mother's chauffeur handed the train ticket to me like it was a paper cut waiting to happen. "Be sure to make your connection in Graybridge," he muttered. Then he turned and walked away. I didn't cry. Not there. Not then. I'd learned that lesson early. Tears don't move statues. The farmhouse was everything the Weatherbys feared. Unvarnished, crooked, real. It sat on a patch of stubborn land that didn't care about manicured hedges or social standing. It breathed in creaks and coughed in wind. And inside it, waiting in the doorway with a crooked smile and flower on, her apron, was Aunt Mabel. Not really an aunt. Not really anything. She was my mother's cousin's something or other. A woman who had been conveniently forgotten by the family tree. Until they needed a branch sturdy enough to hang me on. "You're here," she said, like she'd been expecting me her whole life. I stood there with my soggy suitcase and my too tight shoes and nodded once. "Looks like I am." She didn't ask why. She didn't ask what I'd done. She just opened the door wider and said, "Supper's almost ready. Hope you like stew and pie." And just like that, I was inside. That first night, I didn't sleep. Not because the bed was uncomfortable, it wasn't. Not because I was scared, I wasn't sure I had room for fear anymore. But because the silence was deafening. At the Weatherby house, even the silences had sound. Judgment had a rhythm. Disappointment had a scent. Here, all I could hear was wind brushing past the shutters, like it was checking to see if I was still there. I sat up in bed and looked at the single photo on the nightstand. It was of a girl, young, round-faced, wearing a yellow dress with muddy knees. She was laughing, really laughing. I had never seen her before, but something in the curve of Coden. Her chin felt familiar. I turned the frame over. No name, just a date scribbled in faint pencil. July 14th, 1983. That was years before I was born. I didn't know it then. But that girl, her smile, her story would become the key, too, unraveling everything I thought I knew about my family. But first, I had to stop seeing myself the way they had taught me to. The days on the farm passed slowly. No parties, no corsets, No mirrors with gold frames waiting to reflect back the parts of me that were unacceptable. Just chores. Chores. Air, just space to breathe. Aunt Mabel never told me what to do. She just did. And if I wanted to eat, I had to do too. So I milked, I chopped, I shoveled, I sweated. And something strange started to happen. My body, the one they called too big, too much, too wrong, began to feel like mine. Not a problem to be fixed. Not a curse to be hidden, but a tool, a strength. I lifted bales of hay like they were nothing. I outran the farm dogs without, gasping for air. I learned how to move through space like I deserved to be in it. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like apologizing for existing. Still, the silence of that photo on the nightstand haunted me. That girl's smile, the date on the back, the way Aunt Mabel always paused before answering any question about family. One afternoon, I asked her, plain as I could, who was the girl in that photo? Aunt Mabel looked up from the bread dough she was kneading and said nothing. For a moment, then she wiped her hands, walked to the sink. I stared out the window like she was waiting for the past to arrive on the breeze. She was someone special, she said finally. Someone who disappeared too soon. And someone the Weatherbys never wanted you to know about. I felt the hair rise on the back of my neck. Why? She turned back to me, and for the first time, I saw it. A flicker of fear. Because if you knew about her, she said softly, you might start asking questions. And questions, Clara, are the one thing your family can't afford. For weeks after that, I couldn't stop thinking about what Aunt Mabel had said, someone the Weatherbys never wanted you to know about. It echoed in my mind when I collected eggs, when I swept the porch, when I stirred stew at the stove. It whispered between the pages of the books I found in the corner shelf near the fireplace. It followed me into my dreams, where the girl in the yellow dress stood barefoot in a field of sunflowers, laughing. Only now, when I looked closer, she had my eyes. The farm had a rhythm all its own. It didn't care if you were ready. It didn't wait for you to decide who you were. It simply was undemanded that you be too. So I learned to move with it. I learned the language of animals and weather. I could tell by the smell of the wind if rain was coming. I knew the hens that laid the best eggs and which fence post was about to rot. I learned that silence isn't always empty. Sometimes it's full of questions, full of memory, full of things no one is ready to say out loud. Aunt Mabel never pressed me. She didn't ask about my parents. She didn't ask what I did to get sent away. Instead, she made room for my questions, for my silence, for my unfolding. She never praised my weight, but she never shamed it either. When I carried 2 sacks of potatoes in one trip, she didn't blink. When I accidentally ripped my shirt helping her lift a water barrel, she just laughed and tossed me a patch kit. You're strong, she said once, slicing apples for a pie. That's something. It was the first time anyone had ever said that word strong about me. Not pretty in the face. Not a good personality. Not for someone like you. Just strong. And I held on to that word like a flame in a cold room. But the mystery of the girl in the photo wouldn't let me go. One rainy afternoon, trapped indoors by a sudden downpour, I found myself drawn again to the small cabinet near the bookshelf. 'Twas old, worn the kind of wood that seemed to hold secrets. Inside, I found stacks of yellowing papers, letters, receipts, old birthday cards, and then a photo album. I opened it, slowly brushing away dust. The first few pages were of the farm, cows, a rusted tractor. Mabel in her 20s with wild hair and a garden of tomatoes behind her, but then her, the girl in the yellow dress. She was in several photos, sometimes alone, sometimes with Aunt Mabel, laughing, always laughing, and sometimes someone else, a man, tall, lean, wearing suspenders and a kind of sadness behind his smile. In one photo, the girl stood between the man and Mabel, arms linked, as if she belonged to both of them, not just a niece, not just a guest. Family? There was no label under the photo, no year, no names. Just that same feeling in my gut. This matters. When Aunt Mabel came in from the barn that day, soaked and windblown, I didn't wait. I placed the album on the table and pointed to the photo. "Who is she?" Aunt Mabel's hands froze on the towel she was using to dry her hair. She stared at the image like it had come to life and was speaking directly to her. "That's Josie," she said quietly. "My sister's daughter, my niece." She sat down slowly, like her knees were suddenly heavy. "She lived here for a while, a long time ago." I leaned forward, my voice barely above a whisper. "What happened to her?" Mabel's fingers traced the photo's edge. "She got too curious," she said. She started asking questions that made powerful people uncomfortable. I swallowed. "Like what?" Mabel looked at me then, really looked at me. And for the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. "Questions about blood," she said. "About names. About who belonged where, and who didn't." After that, the album disappeared. I looked for it that night. The cabinet was empty. When I asked, Mabel just said, "It's safer not to look too deep, Clara. Sometimes the past isn't buried, it's just hiding." But it was too late. The seed was already growing inside me. And then the dream started. It came every night for a week. The same scene, the same girl. She stood in a field of sunflowers, barefoot, spinning slowly, arms outstretched. She wore the yellow dress. Her hair was long and loose, whipping in the wind. She would stop spinning, look right at me, and say, "You have it too, you know?" Every time I woke up breathless. What did I have? What was she trying to tell me? Then one morning, as I was bringing in eggs from the coop, I noticed a box tucked beneath the porch stairs. It wasn't there before. Weathered, nailed shut, covered in dust. I pulled it out, my heart thudding. It was light, too light. Inside, wrapped in a faded quilt, were three things. A small gold locket, shaped like a heart, with the initials JWA folded letter, sealed with wax. A photograph, one I hadn't seen before. Josie, in a white dress, next to my mother. They were smiling, arms around each other like best friends, like sisters, like something more. I stared at the image, the blood rushing in my ears. Why had my mother never mentioned her? Why had she buried this friendship, this connection? And then I opened the letter. My hands trembled. The paper was old, fragile, but the ink was still clear. "Dear Clara, if you're reading this, then Mabel finally decided you deserved the truth. I don't know what she's told you, but here's what I can say. You were never too much. You were never a mistake. You were a mirror of someone they tried to erase. Josie was my best friend, my blood, my shadow. And when she vanished, they made sure no one asked why. Because the Weatherbys are built on stories. And Josie, she knew the one that could ruin them all. And now, so do you. L. The letter wasn't signed with a full name, just an initial L. But I knew. I knew it was from my mother. And with those words, everything I believed about her cracked. She knew Josie. She loved Josie. She had protected a secret and buried it deep, but not deep enough, because now it had found its way to me. The letter shook something loose inside me. I sat on the porch with the quilt wrapped around my shoulders, reading it over and over again until the words etched themselves into my skin. You were never too much. You were never a mistake. You were a mirror of someone they tried to erase. Josie, the name throbbed in my chest like a second heartbeat. Who was she really? And why had my family gone to such lengths to pretend she never existed? And most terrifying of all, T, what did she know? That night, I sat across from Aunt Mabel. At dinner, the tension thick between us. I couldn't eat, could barely look at the bowl of stew in front of me. She pretended not to notice until I broke the silence. "You lied to me," I said. Her spoon froze halfway to her mouth. "You said she was just your niece." "That she?" asked too many questions. But you didn't say she knew my mother? Mabel closed her eyes, the weariness in her face suddenly deeper, heavier. I didn't lie, she said softly. I just left things out. I reached into my pocket and placed the letter on the table between us. She didn't. Mabel looked down at it, didn't touch it, didn't deny it. She left that box for me. I continued with the locket, the photo, this letter. She knew you'd hide it. She knew you'd be afraid. Mabel's lips trembled. I wasn't afraid for me, Clara. I was afraid for you. She pushed her plate aside and stood slowly, moving to the window like she always did when the past crept too close. You think I don't know what it's like to be erased? She said. You think I don't understand what that family is? Capable of when someone threatens their perfect little story. Her voice cracked. Josie was like you. She had a light to her, a wild, beautiful light. But she asked questions. She poked around in places that were locked for a reason. And then she stopped. I waited. And then she disappeared. Mabel whispered. I felt the bottom drop out of my chest. Disappeared. She went to visit your family? Summer of '99. Just for a few weeks, she wrote me letters every day. And then one day, nothing. I leaned forward, my voice tight. What did they tell you? That she ran away? That she was unstable? That she got involved with the wrong crowd? Mabel turned to face me. But Josie wasn't like that. She was smart. She was careful. She knew something. My throat tightened. What did she know? Mabel's eyes flicked toward the letter. I think it has something to do with your birth. I stared at her. You think I have something to do with Josie disappearing? No, Mabel said quickly. Not you, but maybe. The truth about where you came from? The room tilted. I was born in Boston. I've seen the photos. My mother was there. My father. Mabel shook her head. Clara, I've seen those photos too. You were a baby, a week old, maybe? But that's the thing. No one remembers your mother pregnant. I blinked. What are you talking about? She vanished for a few months, remember? Claimed she was traveling for her health. Spa retreats. European rest cures. But no one saw her. Not even your grandmother. I tried to think back. To family stories. To old albums. It was truth. There were no pictures of my mother pregnant with me. No baby shower photos. No hospital room. Only posed shots after I was already born. And something else had always been different. Not just bigger. Not just louder. Different? Like I didn't match. Like I didn't belong. Aunt Mabel leaned across the table. What if your mother didn't carry you, Clara? I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. What are you saying, that I was adopted? That I was? Josie's baby? The possibility hit me like a freight train. It's made too much sense. Josie vanishes. I suddenly appear. Everyone acts like I'm an embarrassment. Not a child and accident. It's a mistake they tried to turn into a Weatherby. No, I whispered. No, that's crazy. Mabel didn't answer. She just looked at me with so much sorrow in her eyes, it almost felt like pity. The next day, I skipped my chores. I went into town to the tiny local library with peeling paint and a rusty bell over the door. I asked to see old birth records. The clerk, a woman with eyebrows too sharp for her soft voice, told me they only kept the county logs for 20 years. That included 1999. I gave her my name, my birth date. She found the registry book, and there it was. Clara Marie Weatherby. Born July 23, 1999. Mother L. Weatherby. Father not listed. I froze. No father, I asked. The clerk blinked. That's what it says. Unusual for a family like that. Yes, unusual and damning. Because my birth certificate didn't list my father. And my father, the man I had been taught to fear and obey, would never have allowed his name to be omitted. Unless he wasn't on the walk back to the farm, I couldn't breathe. Everything was unraveling. Every memory. Every conversation. Every look of disappointment. It had never been about my size. It had never been about my voice. It had always been about my existence, because I wasn't theirs. I wasn't born into their image. I was forged outside of it, outside the frame. A mistake they couldn't erase, but could hide. That night, I stood in front of the mirror in my room, really looked at myself. Not the soft curves or the full cheeks, not the thick arms or the wild hair, my eyes. They weren't my mother's, they weren't my father's, but in the photo, Josie had them too. That same shade of dark hazel flecked with gold. I didn't sleep. I just sat by the window, watching the stars, clutching the locket I'd found in the box. Inside it, there was a tiny slip of paper I hadn't noticed before. It read, "I gave you away so you could be safe, but I never stopped loving you, okay?" I didn't tell Aunt Mabel I was going. Kay just packed a bag, took the first bus into the city, and walked the last 2 miles to the Weatherby estate. My boots left muddy prints on the stone walkway. I didn't care. Let them see the dirt. Let them smell the sweat on my skin. Let them see me, not the version they tried to sculpt from shame, but the real me. The Clara they tried to bury under corsets and polite silence was gone. The Clara standing at their door was fire and fury and questions. When the butler opened the door, he blinked like he'd seen a ghost. "Miss Weatherby," he stammered. I stepped past him without a word. The air inside was cold as ever, still reeked of jasmine and repression. The portraits along the hallway watched me like judges in powdered wigs. But I didn't shrink this time. I walked straight to the conservatory where my mother spent every morning trimming roses that refused to bloom. She was there, as always, gloves on, perfect posture, scissors poised. She looked up and froze. "Clara," she said, her voice too calm. As I live and breathe. I stood in the doorway. "Have questions." She turned back to her roses. "That's not how we greet people in this house." "This isn't a greeting," I said. "It's a confrontation." She placed the scissors down carefully, like she was performing surgery. Then turned to face me. The years had changed. Her face, more lines, more shadows, under the eyes. But her expression was the same. The one that said, "Control the moment, or crush it." "You were supposed to stay at the farm," she said. I was supposed to believe I belonged here. Silence. Then, softly, "You were safe there." I stepped closer. "You mean hidden?" She inhaled, slow and sharp. "I found the letter," I said. "The locket. The photo of you and Josie, a flicker in her eyes. Just for a second. Then the mask returned. That chapter is closed. Not for me," I snapped. Her daughter. Her face paled. "Tell me the truth," I demanded. Nothing. So I said it for her. "You disappeared for 5 months. No one saw you pregnant. Then I appear with no father on the record. And Josie? She vanishes right before that." I stepped forward, trembling now. "I'm not yours, am I?" She sat down slowly, like her knees gave out beneath her. "I was 17, she said, voice distant. She was 18. And we were everything to each other. My breath caught." She kept going. "We were careful, so careful, but accidents happen." I sat across from her, hand shaking. "So you were in love?" She nodded, barely. "She got pregnant. She was terrified. She wanted to keep you, but she was scared. She knew the family would destroy her. She had no money, no support, just me." Her voice cracked. "I wanted to run away with her. We planned it, but my father found out. The old Duke Weatherby. A man so cold, even the family portraits seemed afraid of him. He told me I could save her or doom her," she said. "He gave me a choice. Disappear for a few months, reappear. With a baby, claim it as mine. And Josie would be taken care of. Or what? She'd vanish forever, and I'd never see you again." I stared at her, heart breaking in slow motion. "So she gave me to you." She nodded. "She didn't want to, but she thought it would save your life." I swallowed the lump in my throat. And what happened to her? A long pause. Then, finally, she left. That's all I was told. Left one night and never came back. You believe that? No, she said. I think they made her disappear permanently. Silence stretched between us like a wire ready to snap. You let them erase her, I whispered. Do you let them turn me into a lie? She looked at me, and for the first time there were tears in her eyes. I did what I had to do to keep you alive. I stood. I have her eyes. She nodded. You have her laugh too. That was almost worse. I turned to leave. Clara, I stopped but didn't turn. Do what you want with the truth, she said. But know this, they still watch everything, still protect the story. She hesitated. If you expose them, they'll come for you too. I finally looked back. Let them try. Outside, the air smelled like thunder, like something was coming, and for the first time in my life, I welcomed it. When I returned to the farm, the sky was bleeding twilight. The sun was low, staining the fields gold and crimson, and the air smelled like summer dying slowly, smoke, warm soil, and distant rain. Aunt Mabel was sitting on the porch with her apron still on, a half-knitted scarf in her lap, and a cold cup of coffee beside her. She didn't ask where I'd been. She didn't have to. She saw it in my face. It's true, isn't it? She said quietly. I nodded, my voice caught in my throat. I'm not hers. Mabel nodded slowly, as if she had always known but had been waiting for me to catch up. You're Josie's daughter, she said. She loved you, Clara. I need you to know that. I sat beside her, the air thick with grief, and the knowledge that we were the only ones left carrying a truth the Weatherbys had tried to bury with generations of lies and rose perfume. I want to burn them down, I said. Mabel didn't flinch. I know, she said. I wanted to, too, once. That night, I stood outside the barn and looked at the sky. Stars were sharp, cold. Watching the truth was a sword in my hand. I could use it. I could tell the world that the prestigious Weatherby family had built their legacy on cruelty and silence and the erasure of a woman they feared. I could tell every paper, every court, every family name that they weren't what they pretended to be. But the truth is, sometimes revenge doesn't taste like justice. Sometimes it tastes like ashes, 'cause no matter how loud I screamed it, Josie wouldn't come back. And no court ruling could undo the years I spent hating a body that only existed because two girls dared to love each other in secret. So I asked myself, what would hurt them more? A scandal? Or a life they couldn't control? The next morning, I made a decision. I wouldn't go to the press. I wouldn't sue. Wouldn't beg for acknowledgement. Instead, I'd claim what they tried to destroy. I'd take back Josie's name. I'd live where they erased her. Build where they tore her down. Raise gardens where they left nothing but silence. I'd become the legacy they feared, not because I exposed them, but because I outlived them. We went back to the box together, Aunt Mabel and I. We opened it under sunlight this time, not moonlight. Inside was more than just the locket and letter. There was a deed, handwritten, signed by Josie and witnessed by Mabel. A deed to a piece of land behind the old orchard property left in Mabel's name because Josie had no legal standing. It's yours, Mabel said. She always wanted to build their home, a place where you could grow up in peace. I looked at the yellowed paper, at the scratch of Josie's handwriting, so firm, so determined. I felt something settle in my chest, not grief, not rage, something quieter. Like a tree putting down roots. That fall, we began clearing the land. We chopped dead wood and pulled stones from the earth. We laid the foundation with our own hands. And with every nail, every brick, every beam, I felt closer to her. Not the idea of her. Her, the girl in the yellow dress. The girl with the lopsided smile and the laugh no one could silence. The girl who gave me life and lost hers for it. Sometimes I still dream about her. She's not spinning in sunflowers anymore. Now she stands at the edge of the clearing, hands on her hips, watching me work with that same look Aunt Mabel has when I finally fix the fence correctly. Proud, present, real. People in town began to talk. They asked why the old Weatherby girl was building out by the orchard. Some said I was crazy. Others said I was running from something. But the truth was, I wasn't running anymore. I was planting, building, becoming. One day, I got a letter from the Weatherby house, unopened, sealed with the family crest. I burned it without reading it. They had their chance. Now, I had mine. Spring came quietly that year. The frost melted slowly, reluctantly, like it didn't want to loosen its grip on the land. But when it did, the earth responded like it had, just remembered how to breathe. And so did I. The house Josie dreamed of was halfway done. It stood proud on the hill behind the orchard, bones of timber and sweat, smelling of cedar and sawdust. It wasn't a palace, it wasn't perfect, but it was mine. It's built not to impress, but to belong. One morning, I sat on the new porch with a mug of coffee and a pencil in my hand. I had decided to write it down, all of it. Not for revenge, not for pity, but for record, for truth. It's because Josie had never had the chance to tell her story. And I refused to let it die in silence, so I wrote it, from beginning to end. How two girls fell in love when they weren't supposed to. How a child was born in secret. How that child was passed off as shame. And how, when the world tried to erase her, she came back and built a home out of the ashes. When the manuscript was done, I didn't use the name Clara Weatherby. That name was never mine. It's given like a costume, a cover, a chain. Instead, I signed it. Clara Gisette Vale. Clara for the girl I became through pain. Set. For the woman who gave me life and courage and eyes that refused to look away. Vale because valleys are where things grow. Quietly, steadily, against all odds. I sent the manuscript to a small publisher in Vermont. Didn't expect much, but 2 months later, I got a call. A woman with a voice full of wind and warmth said, "We cried. All of us. We want to publish it. As is. No edits. Just the truth." I nearly dropped the phone, not because I wanted to be famous, but because someone finally had heard Josie and believed her. The day the first printed copy arrived, I drove into town and placed it on the library shelf myself, right between Memoirs and Missing Persons. It didn't have a fancy cover, just a title in plain type. The Girl in the Yellow Dress. A week later, I got a letter from a woman in Boston. She said she used to work for the Weatherby estate, that she remembered Josie, remembered the whispers, the threats, the way the staff were told never to speak her name again. She ended the letter with this: "Your mother would be proud of you. We all failed her, but you didn't." The house is finished now. It stands strong and weathered. Like a woman who's been through storms and still wakes up before the sun, I've planted sunflowers all around it. They grow tall and golden, faces tilted toward the sky like they're listening. Sometimes I think they are. Aunt Mabel moved in with me last month. She said she was too old for chickens and lonely mornings, but I think she just wanted to be near Josie's memory. She brings me tea and advice and the kind of love that doesn't have to be earned. We laugh a lot. More than I ever thought possible. Every now and then, someone from the Weatherby circle sends a message. A distant cousin offering lunch. A lawyer requesting a conversation. I don't reply. They want closure. What they don't realize is, I already have it. I don't need a family crest. I don't need a seat at their table. One built my own table, out of reclaimed wood and truth and stories that won't be silenced anymore. And now when I look in the mirror, I don't see too much. I don't see a mistake. I see Josie's eyes, Mabel's fire, my own strength, and I finally understand. I wasn't given away because I was too big. I was sent away because I carried something they were too small to handle. Legacy, not the kind you inherit, but the kind you forge with your hands. Your voice and the courage to call yourself by your true name. So now I ask you, whoever you are, wherever you are, What would you do if you uncovered the truth about where you came from? Would you destroy everything that hurt you? Or would you build something they could never touch? I chose to build, and I hope you do too, 'cause some stories aren't meant to stay buried. They're meant to grow, like wild sunflowers in a forgotten field, tall, bright, unapologetically seen.